that has one solution that has been, understood as the first line of defense against climate change is make your city more green, better green and high quality of green. So our climate change challenges are far complex and different than that of Europe or North America and Canada. We as a country has to come out of the low middle income country to more a middle and upper middle income country, and that's the aspirations are. Sustainable urban development is that urban development that can
Greetings and welcome to the Secretariat. I am Manav Sumara, and today we have with us an esteemed guest, Professor Saswat Bandhyopadhyay. He's a veteran professor of urban planning and policy at CEPT University and also project director of the Center for Urban Planning and Policy. He's also leading climate research at the CEPT Research and Development Foundation. All of this is in Ahmedabad, by the way. As well as having 25 years of experience, he's here to unpack how policy and governance can truly drive resilient city development. Thank you for having.
Thank you for inviting me, Manav.
Thank you, sir. So, is there something particular about engaging with the policy and bureaucracy side of the urban planning?
Yeah, so any good cities in the world that functions mainly on three pillars. One is the first pillar is policy and governance. Who should rule? Which institution? What would be the hierarchy of that institution? For example, if you see any global cities is generally led by the city mayor. So mayor is the person who is given charge to lead the city. But if you look at our governance structure, it is slightly different. And in around 1992, a constitutional amendment was introduced called 74th Amendment. So we have three tier of government: a national level elected Prime Minister, state level elected Chief Minister, and the third tier is the elected mayor. So mayor is the person who represents the governance in a city. So this policy and governance that empowers those institutions that will operate both in the political side as well as in the executive side. And then how they will, what would be their roles, what would be their responsibilities, what would be the charges in living. Somehow in India, the balance between political and executives keep varying from state to state. For example, if you go to Kerala, you will see the elected members are more powerful or empowered. The level of decentralized really has not happened across India, but globally all major cities are led by their elected mayor. So the second thing what happens here is also within the rules and protocols, you have a governance structure where bureaucracy or what you call executives have to function. And there we see we need to have a lot of reform because the third tier of government has not been really recognized so well, because our cities are becoming increasingly important. One from the economic sustainability, economic productivity point of view. The second, these are the cities which will offer, these are the spaces that will offer education, health and employment to our younger generation. So the cities are at kind of a dual end. And one way it is economically, the productivity hinges on them. And because of that, they produce greenhouse gas emission. And at the same time, the effect of greenhouse gas emission is also visible on the cities the most, because in case there is a flooding, you have large number of people affected. In case there is a heat wave, there is a large number of people affected. And eventually, your economic productivity also gets affected. So that way our cities become central in all our conversations.
And so we see beginning from your early work in satellite town schemes and such. What are some of the things that have influenced your views on land use regulations, for example?
Yeah. So what happened when we were growing, we started in early 70s when we start what we call the phenomena of urbanization. So urbanization means when people from the rural area or hinterland, they start coming to a larger area. And as per our 2011 census, India was about roughly 32% urbanized. That means out of our total population, 32% lives in our cities. But that number of people are very large. Globally, we are housing about 11% of global population in our cities. So after China, would be probably the most large city system. We have about 8,000 towns and cities. Now, the more people started coming in, the cities started expanding horizontally. So, for example, from core of the city, you are started looking for a decent housing. You have to start moving. Decent means affordable housing, larger size. So people started moving away from the city. Now there are global markers like, when you say livable city, what Paris is trying to say, okay, if everything is available within a 15 minutes walk, then there is another marker we use 30 minutes, and there's something called 1 hour city. For means from your home to this. Now coming back to your question about why we needed land use regulation, this sprawl of the cities, which you call urban footprint, started expanding faster. The moment you expand faster, so from the urban land, you are actually encroaching upon or taking away the fertile agricultural land. You are also taking away some of the wetland system, some of the forest system. So the purpose of land use policies are to protect some of the very important elements of our nature or ecosystem. For example, if you take away too much of land for urbanization, the first casualty what happens here is your groundwater recharge stops. If your groundwater recharge stops, then your groundwater table starts falling down. Your cost of energy increases. The second part of it is that then whenever there is a rain, immediately there would be a flash flood. So the key principles of land use regulations are to bring a kind of a sustainable measure so that your built forms are not overtaking all that natural assets, because we have survived several thousands of years because we worked with the nature, we lived with the nature. So that's how the land use policies are done. Land use policies create a priority or ladder of use of those lands.
So I was reading about some of your research, and one of the very interesting things was your interest in management of historic cities.
Yes.
We see that even during your stay in Europe, you may have seen they have this thing called Altstadt,
Yes.
the old city
Old
of a
city.
particular place, which has the cultural identity of that particular city. We too have something very similar happening over in India, which has its very strong cultural identity of the old city space. How do you transpose managing these historical cities?
Yeah, this is one of my core interest areas about old cities. And typically Indian cities are very, very old. When I was living in Europe, the cities were, there were 500, 300, 100 years, 50 years. Some of our cities' history, for example, Ahmedabad itself is 600 years old. If you go to Banaras, Varanasi could be believed to be about 5,000 years old. Now, our cities traditionally had adopted a nature-based way of living. For example, even today, when Ahmedabad is burning about 44 or 45 degrees, we are all trying to take a comfort in thermal comfort through air conditioning and cooling. If you go to Ahmedabad Old City now, even today at this hour, you will see less than 5% people are actually using air condition, any artificial thermal comfort. Now you ask me why? It's because of their orientation, the way they have understood the nature, the way they have done their layouts, the roads, the shades that they have done. We have to learn a lot from our historic cities. The way we manage our thermal comfort, the way we manage our resources, particularly water resources. Many old city houses used to have tankas, rainwater system. Some of them are now defunct, but some of them are still there. That gave them a kind of a sense of water security. That whatever you have, your footprints are not far off. Also, there is a behavior which generally in UK and Europe we call eyes on the street. Means that there are communities watching each other and trying to create a network of safety. So these poles in Ahmedabad, pole as you know is called pratoli, in Sanskrit word is called gated actually. Every pole has this kind of element, there is a pole punch, 5 members, they sit together, people, community interact, there are some social function. So each of our old cities have evolved in their pattern, and there are some key lessons how they have respected nature, particularly water. Also the way the sun path, because India has been predominantly is a country with either arid or semi-arid. So temperatures like places like Agra, Rajasthan, but still the way the built form have responded, a lot to learn from this. And I got a opportunity to write some guidelines called inclusive heritage based city development strategy. It was a part of World Bank and CEPT University together. Basically, looking at how our modern development, new development can embrace the principles of the historic development.
And sir, according to you, what would be some of those policy changes or policy reforms you would like to see to accelerate this management?
Yeah, thanks for this very important question. What happened post independence is majority of our policies were drawn, borrowed and copied from the Her Majesty's policy in UK. Some of them were good, some of them were not applicable, because we are a society, we are almost 30-40% or maybe more are informal activities, because of the people are below poverty line, because of the people in certain economic strata. So when you borrow or take a formal policy to a systems like us, it creates lot of challenges. I'll give you one example. You have seen our water bodies, and you see the European water bodies. They look very pristine. But one thing that differentiates between our water body and their water body, our water body is that we celebrate our water bodies. We go down, we do pujas, we do something, even our trees. Same tree is used for multiple purposes. If you go to some of the other Western countries, tree is like a landscape and taken an image or. So our water body, to make our water bodies, make a plan for water bodies, we have to be much more, have a more integrated solution where you are dealing with a dhobi, you are dealing with a religious person, you are dealing with somebody in a multiple work purposes. So these are policies, we need to have, which even if we have taken them from UK, primarily from UK, and there are other policies as well.
You have been working on a lot of climate-oriented research, sir. So according to you, what are some of the climate-induced risks that Indian cities are most vulnerable to?
Yes, because what happened is a lot of people have little misunderstanding about what is happening or lack of understanding. That question I often get because everybody is reading newspaper that climate change is happening. Now, first question is what is climate change and how it's affecting. Our present climate discourses are a reference to middle of 1850. And from them, when the modern industrial period started, from them, the emission, the carbon in the ambient has risen from 200 parts per million to now probably would be about 430, almost double over last 200 years. Now, this is causing a certain disruption in our weather behavior. So one, our weather is behaving very unpredictable manner. Sometimes you may have a certain rainfall, unseasonal rainfall, cloudburst event, that leading to choking of our water bodies, choking of our roads, etc., etc. So the first impact which you are seeing is urban flooding. All across India, all across our cities, from smaller duration to the larger duration. The temperature, those of us been living in Ahmedabad over the last 3 decades, Ahmedabad always had a very arid weather. The daytime it would be hot and evening time it will be pleasant. You start getting a lot of breeze coming in. Last 4-5 years, the temperature, the evening temperature is not coming down. So it's still at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you'll see the temperature is at 37. So we have to increase more artificial thermal comfort. We are running more air condition, producing more GHG, and more GHG is impacting the climate in an adverse way. There are other large changes because climate change brings two kind of phenomena. One is rapid, like flooding and urban heat, and there are something very slow, like sea level rise, glacier melting. The larger concerns, because if there is a sea level rise, then large part of our coastal areas will become saline. And our agriculture, there will be an impact on our agriculture, there will be impact on our water resources, and those are the larger concerns of climate change at this moment. And we are slowly, as a nation, we are waking up to these realities, because in climate change, one is called mitigation, how you reduce your greenhouse gas emission. Second is adaptation, that when there are frequent changes, like as you have seen recently, there are certain bus stops been made as a cool bus stops,
Yeah.
or there are certain hutments are making cool roofs. These are called adaptation into this. Also our ability called resilience, bouncing back, like what happened in COVID. So our climate change challenges are far, far complex and different than that of Europe or North America and Canada. The second debate is about the equity in climate change, because India, China, particularly those who are now urbanizing countries or industrializing countries, they have entered into carbon space much, much later, maybe in 80s and 90s. But earlier industrialized countries like Japan, Germany, UK and all of them, so, so there is a disparity between, per capita emission carbon, because, the countries which are earlier industrialized is actually who contributed the larger amount of emission. So that parity has to be brought in, and those are the kind of climatic discourses going on.
So let's have a little thought experiment over here, sir. Imagine that we are in the Anil Kapoor Nayak sort of a scene, and you have been made mayor of Ahmedabad as a city, let's say, for a month. What kind of policy reforms would you like to bring to make the city more adaptable, more mitigated, and more resilient towards climate change?
See, only one thing that has one solution that has been, understood as the first line of defense against climate change is make your city more green, better green, and high quality of green. So for countries like, landlocked countries like Singapore, total area is about 700-800 square kilometer. They don't have space to really grow further. But those countries, like, then they are actually looking at per capita green, percentage of green. From 28%, they have improved it to 50-60%. Because that's how, we have to create our cities to make them ready for climatic impact. You go to Manhattan Island, any economic productive area, cities across. So if I made like Nayak that you are saying, the first thing I should look at the green habitat policy, how our streets, how our habitable areas, because most cities in our country, the per capita green is abysmally low. The global standard is about 10 to 12 square meter per person, but if you see many cities except for Chandigarh and Gandhinagar, a few newly designed cities, most of our cities are lower than 5, and that too, that green areas, whatever we produce is not quality green. Unlike, you go to Manhattan, unlike go to Barcelona, you see the kind of green kind of infrastructure is created. So we have to build high quality blue and green infrastructure so that our cities are livable and cities are sustainable. These two are very important, because the more and more people come to city, earlier our focus is only roti, kapda and makan. Now we have to also looking at good cities also need better air quality, better noise, lower noise quality, better water to drink, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So in last year you co-authored a paper about city infrastructure investment pipelines, in which you highlighted a big bureaucratic reform that was needed, which is having a single policy portal sort of a thing, where anyone who wants to apply for tenders does not get dissociated from multiple people bidding for the same project through different agencies and then being cut down by that because of those isolated project proposals. Since now we have a lot of single window portals introduced into the system, do you feel that such form of reforms are still necessary, or is it the efficient way now?
Yeah, I think there are two parts of that paper that I have written. One is that my question that we were looking at it, that why are our cities infrastructure wise always struggling? It's like a city in building, like roads are dug up, the drainage are dug up. We did a small study in one of the street, realized that if you want to build 1 kilometer of road, you need about 4 to 5 Indian crore rupees per kilometer. Now what happens is that lack of coordination increases cost of that construction. So you build a road, tomorrow the water supply guys will come, they said, oh, now we'll dig it up. Then the gas guy will come, they said, oh, I have to come and dig it up. Then the other guys will come. So that is what I meant by the coordination. If you do something like one planning is being done in Gift City, they call it an utility tunnel. So whenever you are building something, there are all services are planned together. It's not, that after the road is done, then electricity guys. So that is the convergence we require. The second part of it is that, that a kind of a professionalization, because our cities, as I said, that our cities were decentralized, the amendment came later. It is still seen India's, policies are more oriented towards the rural areas. Our officers, our civil servants are generally collectors, and generally they get trained more about the rural administration and less about urban administration. And as you know, the urban administration is far more complex, and it requires far more professional people coming together, and also lot of professional and partnerships. Cities are not built by single officer alone. It's a city with a private sector, civil society, academia, research. So a city in Copenhagen, they have done a very interesting exercise. They call it climatorium. So climatorium is a place where city builds partnerships. So if you have a good idea, anybody, and the government wants to do something, or a business community come together and create solutions for the city, because cities have to constantly stay. So when I said single window, is basically what I mean is that not only the single window, but as a platform of cooperation and co-creation of solution that we know you need to work together in the process.
Mm-hmm. And would you suggest any policy reforms that would help in integrated land use development towards the cities?
Yeah, so the land use, because what happened is that again we borrowed a lot from UK. So we had this idea of rigid land uses. The land users were said, okay, this would be residential, that would be commercial. As a result, cities in USA, if you look at very closely, that to get your daily grocery, you have to drive 30 miles. Old days, something like, you go there and there's those. So one major reform we needed is mixed land uses. Mixed land uses means you can build up and then allow multiple functions. And in that direction, Ahmedabad is one of the, prominent cities which made a reform in land uses. Now, similar reform are required at a national level. That when you say land uses, so earlier, some planners were dictating where you should go, where you should not go. From there, we need to shift to nuisance-based zoning. Nuisance-based land use means you will only not allow only few activities that create lot of traffic, that create some amount of pollution. Remaining all things can be permitted. So that's the major big change that we need in our land uses. The second, there are a lot of other regulation that are, we are wasting a lot of our urban land. For example, you're in all property that you see around this office, they have a boundary wall. And within the boundary wall, you see there are small patches of land which is lying underutilized. So many countries across the world, if you have seen in Germany, you have seen in Netherlands, they have removed that boundary wall from there. Now what happens there, that there is a magic starts happening. That land comes on the public domain. And you see a much larger city emerges, something like what is happening now, a part of riverfront. If you have seen some of the new buildings coming across, they are boundaryless.
So let's shake it up a little bit. We'll do like a fast-paced round about some of your expertise that I've learned about. And you can let us know what, according to you, those things mean in the academic as well as the real world. Let's begin with sustainable urban development.
Sustainable urban development is that urban development that can last longer without creating a negative impact on the environment.
Climate and disaster risk reduction.
So we take certain action that will make our life safer, and also we call is leaving no one behind. There is a sustainable development goal says that we need to include every part of society.
Nature-based solutions.
See, we traditionally all our systems are nature based. From that nature based, we are creating cities which are more concrete based. Mm-hmm. So now, if you can bring nature has a healing. Nature also can, has a thermal comfort. Nature can offer you multiple benefits of that. So we are trying to recreate nature in an urban context, and we generally call it a nature-based solution.
Mm-hmm. And urban lakes and water resources.
So all our kind of sustainability in our living, we need air, water and land. These are not infinite resources. So we have to respect water. Otherwise, as you know, there are cases of 0 days in Chennai, 0 days in Cape Town, where one certain day they realize they have no longer have the access to water that they can kind of survive in this.
So I've seen that you worked in a lot of smart cities missions. What do you think about the smart city mission?
Now, why we need smart cities? And that's a very important question, because we have a lot of criticism about smart cities, what this is smart and unsmart. But imagine we are one of the largest, second largest urban systems in the world, with so many people asking for water, drainage, housing, or various services. We have no option but to embrace technology.
So off camera, you were having quite an insightful remark about the 2D ways of planning versus the 3D ways of planning.
Yes.
For example, building something from the ground up always bifurcates or translates the stress towards the underground counterparts of it. And we don't have a smart way of dealing with that as of yet. How do you think policy can drive this sort of a change?
Yeah, that's a very important and interesting question, because as we more intensify our land uses, what happens is that we start going more vertical. So there was an age-old debate among the planner whether you will choose car versus you will choose lift. If you choose car, then you have to drive 30 kilometers. If you choose lift, you have to go vertical. Now, the more vertical you go, then the larger stress you are actually putting on the underground utilities, underground systems, etc., etc. Presently, our policies don't really, the urban planning policies don't really look at our underground capacity so well. However, like cities and countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, they have a policy plan for underground. So, for example, Singapore has already created 3 layers of underground where how much utilities will be required, because utilities are like backbone for any development. So you need to provide space. So presently that third dimension, going below the base level, has not evolved so much in India. And I think we need to have work towards that, because as we, like cities like Bangalore, now Ahmedabad, Delhi, we are intensifying our land uses and going vertical in that.
I see. So we touch upon a lot of cities, for examples, across India. What do you feel are the biggest areas of improvement when it comes to urban development master plans across the nation?
Yeah, the master plan process presently is very, very rigid, in the sense is it is a very long 20 years. Some cities, some state it is almost 10 years with limited revision. One of the major challenges that I was telling you that, that we don't have dynamic data sets. That, for example, today building permission has been given, that doesn't appear in a master plan so well. Maybe you have to wait few years to get it updated. So there are a lot of cities have a dynamic land use plan. Dynamic land use plan means the moment your building permission is given, automatically your land use gets rectified. So one is how much you are building, what type of, the use of land, how many residential, how many commercial. There are cities who counts how many people in today in Bastrapur area are at this hour. This grid has so many thousand people coming.
So we see that the world evolves at a very rapid stage continuously. So the rate of acceleration keeps on increasing. This is also exacerbated by a lot of climate-induced risks and symptoms that we see that they pop up. What do you feel are some sort of these institutional barriers when it comes to planning and execution of master plans with real-time data? Because it would make sense to use real-time data to execute your master plans.
Yeah, this is another very important question. Thanks for asking this. See, when, about 20, 30 years back, if you want to fly an airline, I'll just give an example. I had to go from here to Bhubaneswar, and an air ticket for Bhubaneswar was costing around 35,000 one way. And probably my salary was about 5,000 rupees. So this is 7 times. Today, you see most of our students coming to study or coming to visit, everybody is using Indigo. Or I'm not just taking one airline, but anybody, because you have opened up. We have allowed, earlier there was only Air India, you have no choice, either you buy or go. So we have to, our cities are also have to be decontrolled, opened up for co-creation and co-production. See, all our planning, master planning process today, most of our cities are being done by the regulatory agency. Now, if I am the regulatory agency, I am making plan and I am also trying to regulate, then obviously I am not doing it's like I am the judge as well as I am the person we are seeking justice into this. So we have to separate this function. The role of public sector agencies is to regulate, balance, control fares or nuisances, and planning has to be decentralized. Allow community to come in. For example, a resident of a society, they said, okay, we can make a plan. I know this place better. Similarly, a private sector wants to make a plan. So most of the global cities, like Singapore, if you see that the agency don't make the plan, they only make the regulation, they break the guideline and allow many private sector to come in. And we need that immediately to decontrol our cities. And one of the biggest lacunae is the economy in the city and urban planning of a city, they don't really get along together. So we need to bring all the stakeholders coming together and make a plan which is more workable for the city. And as it is changing, as you rightly pointed out, you can't have 10 years plan and sitting, I have made. You also have to be ready with, flexible planning, because it's a very complex adaptive system.
So this rapid urbanization process has a lot of linkages with vulnerabilities of a city development that we already discussed. And something really interesting that caught my eye reading your work is your endorsement for more decentralized governance models, or let's say scalar governance models. How do you envision these decentralized governance models?
See, what's happening here is that, sitting in a city of 50 lakhs, 40 lakhs, sitting in a city hall, a commissioner or a mayor has a very distilled information access. So if there's area which is vulnerable, constantly getting flooded or getting impacted by heat or any other form of, pollution, it makes much more sense to a local community at a local level or a local level of government deciding where would be that those plans would be. Where would you plant your trees? How would you do your streets? How do you do certain decisions? So presently those decisions are getting aggregated at certain level. For example, in Germany, before making any plan, this is a mandatory that you have to present that plan to the community, get their kind of suggestions, comments. For example, if you're doing a street in the area, you're doing some shopping areas, then you involve the community, and sometimes certain brilliant suggestions come in, which actually can, I mean, you can't think if you're sitting in the city hall and looking at the city like 30,000 feet and above.
So let's have a look into the future for a moment. Let's say it's the year 2047 and our Prime Minister's Viksit Bharat vision has come to fruition. How do you think were the policies in the past years that have led to this particular moment for us when it comes to urban development?
Yeah. When you say, I mean, we keep hearing about what India would be in 2047. Now, the idea of the pathways to Viksit Bharat. Now, just imagine that, as India becoming more and more prosperous, because first is that you have a sustainable economy, which is long term. At the same time, also you have to create jobs, also maintain equity in this process. So this vision that we're talking about, India becoming a developed nation is a very well drawn one, because we as a country has to come out of the low middle income country to more a middle and upper middle income country, and that's the aspirations are. Now in this journey, we have to visualize what is India in 2047 that we are aspiring. Is it an India that is completely polluted, congested, the land, water, everything is polluted and compromised? Or is it an India that we are seeing, people are, attracted to this habitat, there is, better quality of life and living. So the policies, the reforms we need to do certain, for example, there is a reform I was telling you about the land use reform, from a very rigid to more flexible land uses, from a very rigid regulation to more, partnership based. The way we are doing the planning, we may be more, the more partnerships where multiple stakeholders are coming in. But we have to constantly reinvent our policies, governance and institution which is future ready. Because in this journey of Viksit Bharat, cities are at core in this journey. So in nutshell, what we are saying is that we have to really start aligning or realigning our policies which are more towards, to how to make our cities more livable, more productive and more attractive for investment, doing business and ease of living. As it's said, that live well, earn well and play well in our cities.
So do you look out for planning and development innovations? For example, I was reading stuff like dynamic zoning, ecosystem services. So are there similar innovations that you're on the lookout for that will drive our roadmap to Viksit Bharat?
Yeah, so there we have to constantly encourage, incubate innovations in all, not only in planning, also infrastructure service delivery, dynamic land use zoning that we were discussing. There are also building materials which will emit lesser greenhouse gas emission. The technology of construction of infrastructure, looking at our cities three-dimensional in nature, and we need million solutions coming co-created together. So from your parking management, for example, traditionally cars were parked and then there was always an issue. Now you have a lot of sensor-based parking application. We also have, streets which are also called sponge street. The streets which can absorb your water when there is a sudden outburst of rain. Similarly, there would be a lot of roofs which are actually now being looked as called green roof. Now there is a new concept called blue and green roof, where you can do water as well as green harvesting in a small. So cities like Paris, which has created a rooftop policy, which is a blue-green roof policy, is how you will be able to harvest those essential things. So essentially, it's a very dynamic space. The way the interactions taking place would require a lot of solution.
And so throughout your career trajectory, you might have gone through a lot of different sort of experimental governance models, how this would turn out when it comes to, let's say, land use evolution of India, how would a policy reform change our regulations, change how we integrate ourselves through the master planning, let's say, for something. When we look at this sort of a top-down view of your career, how would you summarize sort of like a policy brief when it comes to land use development?
Yeah, the land use development has to be, we have to turn it around from a very top down to a more bottoms up. And one of the challenge in many of this governance system is that participation of the youths, the younger people coming in. So I was in charge of, making a spatial planning policy in Pacific Island, Fiji and Tonga. And we realized that, the most of these policies which are being done, they are done by some old gray hair people, and the younger people who are actually coming, who are going to live on those places. And so we have to create space for a kind of a younger people led in the governance. So you see many places, you see a young mayor is just 20-30 years old, and we need to see policies. We create enabling policy that more of our younger people and more professional people coming, as a communicator, a person who is trained in certain areas are coming in the public domain and leading our cities.
Thank you so much, Professor
Thank you
Saswat Bandhyopadhyay.
Thank you.
We had quite an insightful conversation, going from smart cities to just urban development in general, pitting Indian cities against, let's say, reference models of different cities across the world, what we can learn from them and whatnot. I hope we were able to explore all the places that we wanted to. And I think we would like to close our conversation over here today.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Manav, for inviting. It was indeed a very interesting conversation. We are trading through diverse areas about urban development, but it's very meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With this, we end our interview with Mr. Saswat Bandhyopadhyay. You have been keeping informed with the Secretariat. Please like, share and subscribe for more such insightful content.